After a fairly uneventful flight and a problem with baggage at Johannesburg Airport, Sue and I found ourselves at our hotel in Cape Town. We were introduced to our fellow passengers and briefed by our guide Melvin, who would be looking after us for the next 23 days on an overland journey from Cape Town all the way up through Namibia and Botswana to Zimbabwe and the Victoria Falls. Early next morning, Melvin briefed us on our first day, which would take us south down to the Cape of Good Hope, through Hout Bay and Chapman's Peak, and then back home via Simonstown and the Boulders Beach Penguin Colony. We were all in fairly high spirits. We stopped off at several viewpoints on the way, with our guide for the day, who was Hein, seen here on the right. He was also to be the driver of our huge overland truck for the whole trip. Unfortunately, I had left in a bit of a hurry, as Sue was feeling unwell and decided not to come out for the day. Somehow, I forgot to check my camera bag and found that I had no SD card in the still camera and no spare batteries for the video. Disaster. So I had to make do with a few low-res stills and virtually no video. Next morning, normal service was resumed. Sue had fully recovered and I had a complete camera bag. We had a couple of hours to spare before our truck was due to leave, so we decided to grab a taxi and catch the first cable car of the day up to the top of Table Mountain. We were in luck. It was a perfectly clear morning with stunning views all around, and initially very few other tourists. All too soon it was time to return and join our fellow travellers for the long drive north to Clan William and the Cederberg Mountains. On arrival we had time for a quick swim before dinner and an early night ready for our 7:30 AM departure the following morning. It was quite a long drive to the Namibian border, through a variety of green fertile land and rocky arid countryside. We had lunch by the roadside just before we reached the town of Springbok. Melvin and Hein produced a super rice salad which we all tucked into. We then pressed on to Springbok for a supermarket stop before passing uneventfully across into Namibia. Our overnight stop was 10k down the road at the curiously named Felix Unite Lodge. It was a fantastic spot, situated on the Orange River, which divides South Africa from Namibia. All of our lodges overlooked the river, which was the home of numerous colourful birds. There was plenty of time for a walk around the site before a swim and a beer by the pool. Dinner tonight is produced by Melvin and Hein and consists of tomato soup and a tasty stir fry with rice, all washed down with beer. This morning we begin with a long, hot and dusty drive through some harsh countryside. Although the roads are unmade, the surface is remarkably good in places, with very few potholes, unlike the UK. On the way we pass several villages like this, which house agricultural workers. Melvin fills us in on the way of life in these villages. It's all very quiet, as most of the inhabitants are out at work. Further on we get a few glimpses of the beautiful Klipspringer. Landscape here is arid and quite hot, and we have a couple of comfort breaks before pushing on to AAIS. When we finally arrive, the place is a complete surprise. A large complex right in the middle of nowhere. There is just time for a swim in the thermally heated pool before a beer and lunch of hot dogs and salad produced by Melvin in double quick time. Back on the road we spy another Klipspringer. It is actually. Later we stop for a short walk into the desert where Melvin explains some of the features of the arid desert. At 3:45 in the afternoon finds us at our lodge, where we can unpack, freshen up, and then at 5 make our way to Fish River Canyon. We've brought wine and beer so that we can have a drink as we watch the sunset. Hein drives us to a point where we can walk back to the main viewpoint ready for sunset. As luck would have it, the sunset was not one of the best. However, the wine and nibbles were great. Next morning our bags are in the truck by 7 AM and we go for breakfast in the quaint garage, which is now a shop and cafe. Today we have a long ride into the Namib Desert and through the little town of Bethany. Mid-afternoon and we reach Hammerstein Lodge, where we are to stay for 2 nights. These wild springboks and this little carousel wander the grounds, making it easy for us to film them. There is also a captive oryx, which looks quite formidable up close. Next morning we set off in the dark just after 6 AM, arriving at the Nam Ab Nakluft National Park at 7 AM when the park gates open. There is just time for a comfort stop and a look at the weaver bird's nest before pushing across the park to the Sossusvlei sand dunes, which is our main objective today. After an hour's drive in our truck we transfer to 4x4s and then begin the walk out to the dunes, which are said to be some of the highest in the world. On the way, Melvin points out important features and explains how a dead valley is formed when changes in the climate cause drought, enabling the dunes to encroach and cut off the water supply. It's very hot today, and we all begin to flag a little as we get closer to the dead valley. When we finally arrive, the sight is quite surreal, like something out of a nightmare movie. After lunch, we make our way to a small canyon called Cesarium, which is a marked contrast to our walk in the dunes. This little sidewinder snake and a dead scorpion was the only creatures other than birds which we saw here. Today we have another early start, out through the park, stopping on the way at Solitaire for coffee and apple cake before making our way across the desert to the Tropic of Capricorn. The countryside is constantly changing, and we take the opportunity to stop off as we climb through the hills of the Cusib Canyon before mile after mile of flat desert on the way to Walvis Bay. Finally, we reach the bay and have a quick look at the flamingos before arriving at our hotel.